Hey, thank you to Baba, to Mara, to Sheriar, and to the community that has supported me and Tom through this time for years of working on this book. Those of you who have written and edited and put together books know what a labor of love it is. And I'd like to also thank what we came to call the Tom team. Lois Brager, Dana Ferry, Lynn Berry have been wonderful editors, along with myself. John Oates, whose artistry is manifest in those beautiful prayers, which are now hanging again, redone in the Lagoon Cabin. John has been very helpful. And along with Greg Butler, Ed Legum has done a wonderful job with book design. I'm sure you will see that. There are so many people that I could go on and on and on, but I will just say it felt like it didn't just take a village, it took a city. And we did it. So thank you, everybody, Mayor Baba, and all of you who helped. People have asked, how did the book idea came about? How did it come about? And I would say, after Tom sharing his stories for so many years, people started saying, have you written those stories down? And it just became more and more evident that it would be something that he would enjoy doing and that people would enjoy if the book ever came to fruition. So I think it's been about 7 or 8 years in the making, because we just would go away here and write. Tom would write. We actually went to Ireland once for a couple of weeks and wrote in Ireland, which was especially conducive to Tom's Irish creative roots. And I guess to say that the chronologies that were have been laid out in Lord Mayhare and in the Awakeners and in all the different Kitty's book and Darwin's book have been very helpful. Once we started putting the stories together, those chronologies were very helpful because I knew Tom's stories, of course, by heart, but I didn't know where for instance, the story of the seashell at the beach, where that happened during those 2 weeks in May, where the story of the Parsi businessman in Guru Prasad, where did that fall in the 62 Guru Prasad days? And it was very fascinating to me to really dive deeper into Lord Mayhare, the Awakeners, different sources to find out and to really place the stories in a proper chronology. The photos in the book came from many sources. The archives in India were extremely helpful. The Sufis in California were very helpful. Material from MAC has been extremely helpful. And, here and there, different photos would manifest. One particular source that I loved was, some of you may remember the story Tom loved to tell about going to meet Fred and Ella for the first time in New York in 1956. And Ella answered the door and said that it was a very auspicious day, that he was there to hear more about Baba because their beloved little Shotzi, who had inadvertently gone down the fire escape and gotten run over down at the street below and was so beloved of Fred, had all at once manifested the morning that Tom came to hear more about Baba. And of course the cat had a German accent, in Tom's storytelling. So the ghost of the cat says, "Where I am now, Papa, it is very beautiful." And then, Ella said that Fred was thrilled when the cat walked through the wall and disappeared. Anyway, the reason I'm telling the Shotzi story is that we thought, let's find a cat and Fred. And we were able to find a picture of Fred with a cat on the roof of his apartment building through, first through Mayor Baba Travels, and then I found out that Mac owned Fred and Ella's collection, and it was there. So I, on a trip to Asheville, got that photo for the book. So some of the stories about other images from the book are especially interesting to me. One was that Tom had studied as a teen with Walter Goltz, who was a retired oil painter who actually started the summer school for the Art Students League summer school in Woodstock. He was in his mid-70s. Tom was 16, 17. Tom's older brother brought Tom to meet Goltz, who took Tom on as his student, and we were looking for a photo of Goltz. The photos we saw online were just dreadful, and I was trying to figure out what to do about this. We need a really good photo of Goltz. All at once, just around that time, the phone rang. I heard Tom say, yes, I grew up in Woodstock. Yes, I studied with Walter Goltz. And I rushed to the other phone, and it was a man called Bruce Weber, who has a blog on the Woodstock Art Colony. And he was, at that very time, assembling a blog about Walter Goltz, seeing that there was very little information about Goltz online, in books. And it just so happened that in his research, he had contacted Goltz's family, and he had a self-portrait of Goltz that he had put on his blog, or he was about to, and he told us how to contact the family, and they gave permission. So we have this beautiful self-portrait of Tom's first painting teacher that we were able to use for the book that is just absolutely beautiful. And another interesting story to me was that as I looked over the totality of the book, I thought to myself, Tom hasn't written anything about the Woodstock Festival. And of course, he was from Woodstock, and many stories around that time, the illustrious person who came into his store around the time of the festival. And I said to Tom, you haven't included anything about the Woodstock Festival. And so he actually, after writing the whole book, he added a few paragraphs because, of course, he didn't go because he wasn't interested in rock and roll, and he wasn't interested in hallucinogenic drugs anymore. So that was very interesting, because then we were able to get a few letters that he had in his possession from Bruce Hoffman, who helped to organize a Baba Presence and a Baba tent at the Woodstock Festival, and that was wonderful to get that information into the book and to add that, Woodstock information, which many people would have wondered why that wasn't in the book. In the last, I'd say, month and a half of putting together the final, many times looking through the book, looking through the material, friends were visiting from Asheville, and the husband very eloquently recited a Goethe poem, and then he said, Goethe, upon breathing his last, raised himself up and he said, "Mehr Licht," passed away, more light. And I went into a panic mode because Tom had been sharing this story for years that William Turner, his favorite painter, raised himself up, in England somewhere, and, said, "More light." Tom did a great dramatization of that moment. And I thought, oh my God, who said more light? Because that's the title of the book. So I rushed to the computer And sure enough, Goethe said mehr Licht, more light. And Turner supposedly said, the sun is God. So I had to rush to the preface in which Tom has this story, change it and get Ed Legum to sort of shift everything around and make it fit right so that William Turner didn't say more light. But we used Turner was one of my favorite artists, painters, and his use of light has inspired me, and so that chance, or of course we know things aren't chance, meeting with the friend who mentioned Goethe saying mehr Licht sort of saved the day of the preface. So now I think it would be wonderful to read a few passages from Tom's book that are some of my favorites. And is my voice loud enough? Oh, good, good, good. Okay. So one of the touching aspects of Tom was that from his early childhood, he had a tremendous love for Jesus from going to the little Catholic church in Sauk Hill, 7 miles from Woodstock. I must dwell now upon how religion entered my life and influenced my experience. The entire community was Roman Catholic, and Mass on Sunday morning dominated the week's events. However, although only 7 years old at the time, Sunday Mass in no way enthralled me. While all in the family were centered upon preparation for this Sunday event, I would often feign illness in order to escape any commitment to the alienating experience of the Latin, the robes, the genuflecting, the bells, and incense. On rare occasions when I was successful in my desire to remain home, away from the Sunday Mass, I achieved such fulfillment in the creation of my own love form for Jesus. I would place beautiful stones in a circle surrounding a small picture of him, colorful feathers against the stones, and flowers before or above Jesus. I would open the New Testament and read about Jesus and be with him. This so much satisfied me. When attending Mass at that early age, what reached me most clearly and meaningfully were the words by and about Jesus, which were read and spoken by the priest. These stories of his life and what he had said captivated me. How often I was preoccupied with them and developed a very private relationship with Jesus. It fascinated me that he said that one day in a far distant time, he would return once again. How often I would dwell upon that prophecy. When would he return? When would I be with him at this time? At that time? His suffering and crucifixion grieved me. These preoccupations were solitary and entirely my own, not having been put upon me by anyone. This was not at all a topic of conversation within the context of my family experience, and generally speaking, this subject was not one that preoccupied Roman Catholics. I remember how often, whether being alone in the heart of nature, lying in my bed at night, or even in the midst of playing with friends, I would recall and dwell upon the suffering having been experienced by Jesus. Its effect upon me evoked such sadness, even tears. So often I longed only to be with him. On the valley floor through which the Sauk Hill Creek flowed, and centrally located in the middle of a broad pasture, was a large one-room schoolhouse which I attended. This building accommodated all 8 grades of elementary school. Although there were about 25 students, the solitary teacher, Miss Ruby Cure, had the daunting task of instructing all 8 grades throughout the day. The space within the school consisted of one very large room Within this space, all the old-fashioned wooden seat desks accommodated the young people. They were arranged sectionally by grade. While one grade was being instructed, the other grades were strictly involved in preparation for their turn to be taught. Discipline and obedience prevailed and were the order of the moment. One entire eastern wall of this building was filled with large windows which looked out upon the broad pasture and rushing creek, the steep hillside. Above and beyond was the church. How well I remember that schoolroom, how fulfilling it was for me to contemplate through the large windows the enthralling beauty beyond the pasture. The water rushed over the rocks beneath the steep and wooded hillside. From here I might see hawks and crows flying over the trees against the clouds in the sky. So often I was caught up in the visual contemplation of such wonderment. As I gazed out from my schoolroom windows, enchanted with the enthralling beauty of this landscape, I would often so easily imagine Jesus himself standing under the trees at the edge of the rushing water, waving at me and smiling as he beckoned me to come and join him. How often thoughts of Jesus entranced me, creating within me a sustained longing to be with him. But these distractions caused me serious hardship when Miss Ruby Cure, observing the absence of focus upon my studies and preparation, would loudly call out, "Thomas, you are not obeying me. Go now and stand in the corner." A dunce cap would then be placed upon my head. Yet this longing to meet Jesus was to become and to remain a central element of my continued growth and development. As many of you know, one of the highlights of Tom's lifetime this time around was being with Mayor Baba in the lagoon cabin. After he and his first wife Yvonne met Baba there, May 20th, Tom had an experience the next afternoon, May 21st, which I would like to share, which of course has something to do with the title of the book. On the afternoon of May 21st, the day following our private introduction to Baba, I received Baba's note from Adi about not worrying at all. I contemplated Baba's comment seriously and wished so fervently for his presence once again. Most of us were standing, including myself, as we faced the cabin. I was talking to Leatrice Shaw, who sat upon one of the large horizontal logs, her back to the cabin. Amongst us all, the psychic preoccupation with Baba was intense. At one moment, Margaret Crask, one of Baba's close ones from England, appeared before us. She had evidently just left the cabin and indicated that she had a message from Baba. She stood just to the right of the cabin near the roadside, closer to the original kitchen. Everyone focused attention upon her, and conversation stopped as she looked toward us inquiringly. Quietness prevailed as she said, "Meher Baba wants to see Tom Riley now." My response was instantaneous. I left Leatrice abruptly in mid-sentence and crossed the road. When I reached Margaret, all she said was, "Enter the cabin through the lakeside door, and don't forget to remove your shoes before going in." She then walked away toward the original kitchen. I turned toward the cabin door, and suddenly an alteration in my consciousness occurred. Unexperienced stillness consumed me Everything I beheld reflected a sacredness. My entire being was at once elevated. At the steps of the lagoon side door, as I began removing my shoes, there occurred a transformation, a holiness which revealed itself within me. It took my breath away. It instilled within me the awakening of a reality I had never before experienced. At once, a peace descended upon me, and more than that, a sacredness. It was His presence, and it took primacy over everything else. As I opened the cabin door, in a brief instant, I saw on my left a small photograph of Baba as a boy. I thought, oh, what a heavenly child. And now, directly before me, seated in an armchair, I beheld Baba himself. He was surrounded by radiating silver light. It filled the entire room. At that moment, in brief suddenness, I recalled the silver emanation of light projecting from the heads of saints and Christ himself in Renaissance and Baroque sculptures and paintings. In the room now, I beheld Baba within this brilliant effulgence. Never before had I experienced such shimmering light, such holiness. There, magically before me, Meher Baba was seated at the very center of this radiance. I was overwhelmed as he sat there facing me. I was his prime focus, his center of interest. He was beside himself with joy at seeing me. His gaze from an otherworldly dimension was transforming me as this heavenly silver light emanated from him. The entire ambiance was suffused with his holiness, his presence. He was smiling, and from this wondrous, sublime state, he extended his hand toward me. I took it in both of mine and kissed it. Opening his eyes, and with a gentle, subtle smile, he extended his open hand above and upon my head, then closed his eyes. He withdrew his hand, and I arose and made my way toward the door. Enthralled with his presence, and just before leaving, I paused and turned, gazing at him. In his divine state, holy light radiated around him, filling the room and my being. I had become one with the presence which he had bestowed upon me. I observed him smiling with his eyes closed. In the midst of such unspeakable beauty, I left the room. Tom would often speak at the end of his talks about what it was like for him being in Baba's inner presence and companionship. And I encouraged him to write some of these, which he had often done in the past, and to flesh out some of these stories. So after the bulk of the book, he wrote some reflections, and I would love to close these readings with one of these reflections from Tom called Oneness with the Beloved. For those of us who are connected to Meher Baba, he is the personification of the sacred beloved within each of us, and become our companion in this most important venture. He has told us that he is none other than what you and I really and truly are behind the facade of this separate existence. Our true destiny is to realize our oneness with the great beauty of this divine love, this divine beloved. So, the prevailing thoughts or impressions which have been inherited over the vast course of time have shrouded our consciousness like mists, obscuring the subtle image of the distant mountains. These mists can be lifted, they can disappear, and these mountains can wondrously reappear through the practice of more preoccupation, more communion with what eventually becomes known to one as the friend, the divine beloved, the companion within. Mayor Baba has said, quote, "The beloved can only be found within you, for his only abode is the heart." Close quote. I recall Baba having said that one who walks in singleness of heart shall be his companion. As this relationship with a companion begins to instill itself within us, a wish for detachment emerges, and the urgency of earthly wanting is sublimated into a spiritual longing. One becomes more and more aware that self-interest has estranged us from the sacred, resulting in a prevailing anguish and grief over this ensuing alienation. Our one focus becomes the desire to discover, to witness, and to realize our oneness with this reality. The great beauty of this divine love, this divine beloved. Okay. Oh, maybe we're all leaving to go into heavenly realms with Bob. As this relationship with a companion begins to instill itself within us, a wish for detachment emerges, and the urgency of earthly wanting is sublimated into a spiritual longing. One becomes more and more aware that self-interest has estranged us from the sacred. Tom must be here. Okay. One must become more and more aware that self-interest has estranged us from the sacred, resulting in a prevailing anguish and grief over this ensuing alienation. Our one focus becomes the desire to discover, to witness, and to realize our oneness with this reality. The great beauty of this divine love, this divine beloved. Baba said to me when I was near him at Guru Prasad that when one has become connected to the Master, one has to love him. Setting one's heart on the Master is the beginning of self-purification. Self-surrender means giving up through continuous communion with the Beloved, the Master, the sanskaric impressions which make for separation, for alienation from one's sacredness. In time, with dedication, longing for this purity evolves. Further, Baba has said, to be a recipient of the Master's help, one must make a continuous effort to surrender. Spiritual advancement is a succession of one surrender after another until the goal of the final surrender of you as a separate self is achieved. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cathy, I would appreciate that was a Ramakrishna book hopped on.
That was a Ramakrishna what?
Ramakrishna book hopped on.
Oh, that's perfect.
Wow.
Wow. And that was Ramakrishna was his first connection. Oh my God, could we bring that book up here? That's perfect. A Ramakrishna book fell off the shelf
By itself.
by itself. Oh, Tom, you're here. Oh God, Tom, you did it. You did it. So when Tom went to art school, he befriended somebody who told him about Ramakrishna, and he feels that was the beginning of his spiritual journey. So this just fell off the shelf, so thank you, Tom. Oh, the leprechauns are still at work. That's great. I'm not, should I share the video first or questions and answers? What do you think?
Video.
Video? Good. Video. Okay, so 2 months before Tom passed, Greg Butler came to our house at our request, and we went through all the photos in the book and spoke about them, so that this was a wonderful last tribute from Tom very shortly before he passed. And Greg put this together. Thank you, Greg Butler. While at the new school in New York, one of your favorite professors was Dr.
Yeah, I
Sabu.
was taking a study in Indian philosophy from an individual who was born in India. He was from a Hindu background. And he taught very objectively the history of religious involvement in India.
No.
No.
His name was Dr. Sabod Chandra.
Sabod Chandra Roy, R-O-Y.
And he and Tom became
Very
good
agreeable
friends.
and very friendly. And he was quite amazing
Degrees.
because he was very seriously recommended not only in India but in Europe and America.
So the wonderful connection that happened between Tom and Dr. Roy was that one day Tom went to Weiser's bookstore down in the village, and what did he see on a post but a big poster saying, "Just off the press"?
God speaks.
So that was 2 years later, Tom sees Baba's name again and sees his photo. You went to Weiser's and there was Baba's face, and just off the press, God speaks. So of course you bought the book.
Read the book.
And then
Was overwhelmed by its essence, which was so informative and fulfilling for me.
what you did was so interesting. The connection that happened was that you told Dr. Roy.
Yes, and he acquired the book somehow, and he was overwhelmed by the essences within the book.
He was blind, so he had somebody read him God Speaks.
I'd forgotten.
And then when he finished it, he told you that the very night that the reader finished God Speaks, he had gone to a social gathering. Somewhere in Manhattan, he went to a social gathering, and who did he meet but Phyllis Frederick
Oh, and Adele.
and Adele Walken. And
They impressed him very seriously.
so he was thrilled. He had so inspired by God Speaks, and here were two of Meher Baba's close disciples.
Yeah. They were extremely well informed and highly intelligent.
Because this was the spring of 56, you got God Speaks. So you were given the phone numbers. Dr. Roy got the phone numbers for you of Adele and Phyllis.
I right away met them.
Then you called.
Yeah, connected with them.
And they told you
about the Winterfelds.
Yes. And so
a marvelous husband and wife from Germany and extremely well informed about the history of Indian philosophy and the study of Meher Baba's life.
That's right, because they had been Buddhists, before they discovered Meher Baba. So tell about your going up to meet Fred and Ella. Well, you did have a wonderful first meeting, and then you began attending. And that was
wonderful, wonderful variety of younger Americans.
And
some of them a bit older.
Mm-hmm. I think you were among the younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Fred and Ella suggested that you write to Meher Baba. So we've included the first communication that you sent to Meher Baba, which is so beautifully written and was sent.
You want to read it?
Yes, would you read it, Tom?
Okay.
It's so beautiful.
Who did I write it to? I mean, but I sent it to. I didn't know where he was living.
I think Fred and Ella gave you this address. Sri Meher Baba, Grafton Road, Satara, India.
Oh, I see. Was he there now?
He was there at that time.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it would be wonderful.
Dear Meher Baba, I would have loved Jesus during his last hour in the garden. I love you now. Your servant who wants only to see you, Thomas Riley.
An amazing uncoincidence connected to this letter was that when we received this from the archives in India, you don't have a copy of this, that looking at the postmark from New York City, it says November 29th, 1956, which was just a few days before Baba's second accident outside of Satara. You were sending this just a few days before Baba's accident. So knowing that, would you mind reading that letter again? It means so much knowing that.
Dear Meher Baba, as I would have loved Jesus during his last hour in the garden, I love you now, your servant who wants only to see you, Thomas Riley.
You also connected with Darwin and Jean Shaw.
There was a husband and wife who were very, very seriously involved with Meher Baba and had formed gatherings to learn more about him. Here is a photograph of myself painting in my apartment in Greenwich Village in New York City.
So you would be about what?
Sitting at my easel and painting on a panel.
How old would you have been?
Probably, 23?
That was actually the year you saw Baba's photo, when you were 23.
Not long after that, I married. My wife's name was Yvonne Andro. We married and had a little child, a little female child, which we named Christina. And this is Fred Winterfeld from Germany at his and his wife's home in Manhattan. They had Monday evening meetings completely dedicated to Meher Baba.
So that really encapsulates that time of your connection with the early New York group before meeting Baba in 1958.
Quite a few people involved in Meher Baba. Younger people, older people.
Mhm. So that's chapter 3. In 1957, Baba began talking about coming to the West, informing his devotees, and then in 58 it became clarified that he was coming in mid-May to 1958.
Meher Center.
Right.
And this photograph was taken within a building which was within or upon the Meher Center. And this was simply known as the barn.
Mhm.
It was a building which had been built upon this land, which now became and ultimately would become a very important Baba Center on the east coast of America. And it was here that Baba would arrive and reveal himself to so many people who came there in 1958.
And every morning you all gathered in the barn.
We gathered around him within the barn every morning, and the rest of the program continued for the rest of the day. And here is Meher Baba in another building on the center known as the Lagoon Cabin.
So every afternoon, Baba would station himself in the Lagoon Cabin
and see specific individuals.
The first full afternoon of the 58 Sahabas, you and Yvonne were called in to meet Meher Baba as a couple. And it was interesting to me that when John Bass introduced you to Baba as artists from New York, this is what Baba said.
Yoga for the East is a means toward the fulfillment of the spiritual life, just as art in the West is a process toward the realization of the sacred within. So that was quite a revelation. This is the meaning and process of art. And this is a wonderful photograph of the wooded landscape within the heart of the center with some of the buildings that were constructed there.
And in 58, there were low pine border fences around the inner part of the center. People would sit on these
log forms
and talk and
on
wait.
either side of the roads within the natural earthen roads within the center were bordered on either side by large, round, and long pine logs. Here's Meher Baba with two of his Mandalaya disciples. That is
Adi.
Irani,
Mm-hmm.
one of his close disciples. And on his left side, another named Harich Yesawala.
This photo is such a nice one for me to have seen because, Tom, you're in this photo.
Mm-hmm.
And you see on the left side of the photo, there's Dee Dee Eaton and Larry Carish, and then behind young Larry is Tom. And Baba either just having been set down by the dancers or maybe about to be carried. And we included these two, this photo and this next one, in which Baba would sometimes use canes because you were so aware that Baba had
a serious accident not long before leaving India to come to America. He had this accident in India.
and so was used the cane sometimes and was carried by the dancers. And I think it was very touching that you were so aware that Baba was physically suffering, but he would not ever belie the suffering, but would always bear a cheerful countenance.
Yeah, he would never reflect it.
The next two photos are wonderful images of Baba's inviting the men to join him behind Baba's house when he was so playfully throwing the candy prasad.
Ready to throw this, what was known as prasad, to an individual to his right. And a moment later, when the throwing was fulfilled, he would throw it off to the left before him. And it would be grasped by another individual who had not expected such a gift.
So exactly what happened to you.
Yeah, it did happen to me. Yeah.
Your hand was just
waiting
up in the air.
It suddenly manifested in my hand. What was it?
A little candy.
Oh, yeah. There it was.
Mm-hmm. And I remember you've often said you felt Baba was saying,
be prepared for the unexpected. Yeah.
And I remember behind the caretaker's cabin, Baba was situated with all of the 58 Sahaba Cs, and Harold Rudd had asked Baba, could he play a tape of the life of the Buddha? And this was interesting to us because there you are, leaning against the side of the caretaker's cabin, as Baba was intensely listening to this tape. Very soon before leaving, during that 2 weeks, I think the day before leaving, Baba invited you all to go to the beach.
Some are men, some women.
Mm-hmm. And before you went to the beach, Baba had said he wanted you all to accompany him because he wanted everybody to find a shell.
Oh, for his female mandali or disciple named Mara. So we went down to the beach itself, accompanied by Baba, and began the search. And I found what I thought was a perfect shell. And it was not extremely large, moderate in size, but filled with tiny little holes that were golden surfaced holes. I was deeply impressed with that shell and thought she would love this one. Made sure it was quite clean, sand removed entirely, and brought it over to Baba. He studied it in a very focused way. Then, and he returned it to me, and then touched his heart and his forehead with it, and handed the shell back to me. And this was rather disappointing to me. Because you thought he wasn't going to give it to Mara. And then you became deeply moved as you walked back into the center because you realized Baba had given this to you as a gift. Yeah. Which you now have for always. Yeah. You have that beautiful shell. Right. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it really, one thing I just loved about that story that you have shared before is that Baba was standing completely alone in the dunes. Well, people were nearby searching the sand. But it just, in my mind, I see you and Baba standing alone on the next to each other in the dunes, and Baba taking the shell, pressing it to his head and his heart, and his head, and then directly returning it to me. Mm-hmm. I was also so moved by your talking about going with him, I think the next day, to Wilmington, and as the plane left and taxied and took off into the skies, what? All you below, you were just going with him. Your hearts went with him. Such a very, very important occasion, his departure. He was so fully aware of that as well. Mm-hmm. And cast his love upon us as he departed. That's right. You said he was waving and full of that departuring love. So that's 1958.
Friends had come from Asheville in this summer. We had sat them in front of the computer and gone through the photos in the book, and they said it would be wonderful to record this. So over a number of months and sessions, we did that. Greg brought two cameras and lights, and it was wonderful because, as you can see, Tom was fading, but the energy was still very much there, and it really it's a wonderful testament, I think, to.
And with your prompts, he really came forward fully.
Yeah, he really it's a good give and take. So yeah, those who are interested, actually, on the babazoom.net, there's a YouTube channel, and there are 4 parts that are recorded that you can watch. This was part 2. Chapter 1 and 2 is part 1. Anyway, there are 4 sections, and I think it's beautiful to watch if you would like to. We also included some of the snippets from Tom Talks in the past at the center, so, laughing at his own jokes and all that sort of thing.
Very nice. Very nice, like when you and Tom were that original picture of that living room.
Yeah, that sort of jolly time. So thank you. If anybody has any questions or Irish statements. Oh, I know Doug has to say something with an Irish accent to make this a complete.
I'll say the Irish prayer, but only one time.
Okay, would you wait? Come.
Yeah, because
Come on. Wait. Come up here. Come here, please. We need some Irish juice in this. With the brogue, please.
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Oh, dear God, may those who love us, and those who don't love us, may God turn their hearts. And if he doesn't turn their hearts, may he turn their ankles, so we will know them by their limping.
great.
Oh, Tom would have loved that. Oh, oh, that's great.
Prayer.
Ah.
Against
I guess that won't be added to the Sunday art day programs. Okay, well, thank you.
You're doing Irish.
Very well.
Thank you, Jay Baba. Thanks.